The Solari planet of Violia spun silently in the darkness of the outer sector, a jewel of turquoise oceans and glittering silver cities. Its surface shimmered under twin suns, and from orbit, the planet seemed like a peaceful paradise. For the Solari, it had been a cradle of life for thousands of cycles, a world of art, knowledge, and harmony. But harmony was fragile, and now it was in danger. High above Violia, Counselor Urindra floated in the observation chamber of the Solari High Command Station. Her translucent skin glowed softly under the light, and her multifaceted eyes reflected the growing storm of unease in the galaxy beyond. The station's sensors had picked up a fleet unlike anything the Solari had ever encountered, massive ships moving with a destructive purpose. Each vessel was heavily armored, bristling with weapons designed to tear planets apart. "It's them," Urindra whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "The warlord's fleet, they're coming straight for Violia." A tremor ran through the station as the readings confirmed what they feared. Their own defense fleets were small, fragile, and entirely unprepared for an attack of this magnitude. The Solari were brilliant with technology, but only for creation and maintenance, not war. They had never needed to fight in generations, and now fighting was exactly what would determine their survival. "We cannot stop them," said Commander Tharrell, his voice heavy with defeat. "Not with what we have. Not here." Urindra turned, her gaze sharp. "Then we call for help. There is one species, one that the legends claim can survive anywhere, fight anything, and win when every other species would perish. Humans." Tharrell's jaw tightened. "Humans? You mean the Deathworlders, the ones who thrive in worlds that kill everything else?" "Yes," Urindra said firmly. "They are dangerous, yes, but they are also unstoppable in ways we cannot imagine. They are the only ones who can save us now." The idea seemed almost absurd. Humanity was not known for diplomacy nor for caution. They were reckless, brutal in their determination, and, most importantly, they were entirely unpredictable. But the Solari had no choice. If they did nothing, Violia would be nothing more than a ruin, and the Solari would become a memory whispered across the stars. With trembling appendages, Urindra activated the ancient distress beacon, a relic buried deep beneath the surface of the central city of Lyrnth. The beacon had not been used in over 2,000 cycles. It emitted a signal not just across their sector, but through the rare, almost forbidden frequencies that humans were rumored to detect. The signal pulsed, a rhythmic sequence of encrypted messages designed to convey urgency, desperation, and the precise coordinates of Violia. It traveled light years, bypassing normal communication channels, and sought out one target above all others, the species whose legends spoke of thriving where death itself ruled: humans. Back in their fleet, humans were already observing the edges of known space. Captain Alaric Voss, commander of the Deathworlder exploration fleet, the Iron Maw, was reviewing standard patrol routes when the alert flickered on his control panel. A sharp, unmissable signal pinged through the system. Its pattern was irregular, alien, but something about it demanded attention. Alaric leaned forward, reading the translation over the fleet's AI interpreter. "Captain," said Lieutenant Merck, a wiry officer with a skeptical edge, This is a Solari SOS." "You're not seriously thinking," Alaric cut him off with a cold glance. "I'm not thinking, Lieutenant, I'm responding. Set a course. Prepare for hyperspace jump. They've asked for the deadliest species in the galaxy, and here we are." Merck blinked. "You realize these are fragile aliens, sir, not exactly battle-hardened." Alaric smirked, a glint of humor hidden beneath his disciplined demeanor. "Exactly. That's why we're humans. We turn fragility into strength. We turn the impossible into routine." In the days that followed, the human fleet left known space, moving faster than any Solari sensor could track. Each ship was built to survive Deathworld conditions, storms that could crush mountains, radiation storms that would strip flesh from bone, gravity that would grind normal ships into dust. To the humans, these ships were home. To any other species, they would have been nightmares. Meanwhile, on Vierlia, the Solari watched the sky, anxious and uncertain. Their communications were alive with debate. Some argued humans would be reckless, perhaps even dangerous. Others believed that any species willing to answer a distress call across such impossible distances must have some merit. Days passed, then hours. The Solari's anxiety grew as their sensors picked up the distant hum of human engines, growing louder, closer, until the edge of their system was filled with the ominous shapes of iron-black warships, jagged and angular, perfectly adapted to lethal environments. And then the humans arrived. The fleet descended in formation, engines glowing with controlled intensity, weapons masked but visible. They did not approach with timid caution. They did not broadcast greetings or formalities. The humans simply arrived, a silent declaration that they were a force to be reckoned with. From the bridge of the high command station, Erendra could barely believe her eyes. They are magnificent," she whispered, awe and fear mingling in her voice. "And terrifying." The largest human vessel broke orbit, sending a signal directly to the Solari leadership. Its presence was overwhelming, commanding respect even before a word was spoken. A holographic projection flickered into existence above the bridge, revealing Captain Alaric Voss himself. His appearance was imposing, a mixture of human confidence and battle-hardened authority. His voice resonated through the chamber, deep and steady. "Solari of Vierlia," he said, "we received your message. You called for the deadliest species in the galaxy. We are here. Now tell us, what are we dealing with?" Erendra hesitated for a moment, overwhelmed by the presence of the humans. Then she steadied herself and explained everything: the rogue warlord, his fleet, the destruction of nearby colonies, and the imminent threat to Vierlia itself. Every word was met with silent observation from Alaric, who took in the details with methodical precision. When she finished, he paused, then nodded. "You were smart to call us. We don't just survive impossible worlds, we turn them into advantages. We will give you a chance to survive, but survival will require trust and cooperation. We don't do miracles for the timid." The Solari Council looked at one another, realizing they had no choice. Humanity was dangerous, yes, but if anyone could save them, it was these Deathworlders. "Then we will trust you," Erendra said, her voice trembling but resolute. "For Vierlia, for our people," Alaric's expression softened just slightly. "Good, then let's get to work." As the human fleet moved closer, deploying scouting drones and planetary sensors, the Solari noticed something remarkable. The humans did not panic at the dangerous storms above their oceans. They did not falter at the high radiation levels. They did not flinch when sensors detected deadly gravity anomalies in the mountains and deserts. For them, these conditions were familiar, almost home-like. The Solari watched in silent awe. They realized that the legends were not exaggerations. Humans were not merely survivors. They were masters of the impossible, a species that thrived where others would perish. And yet, they had not even begun. For on the edge of their system, the rogue warlord's fleet was already approaching, its shadow stretching across space like a living nightmare. Vierlia had called for help, and the deadliest species in the galaxy had answered. The question now was simple: could even humanity's unmatched skills save a planet and an entire species from annihilation? Above all else, one thing was clear: the galaxy was about to witness the true strength of humans. The beacon that had started it all pulsed once more in the darkness of space, a heartbeat of hope, and a signal that a storm of death, strategy, and ingenuity was coming. The Solari had no idea how terrifyingly capable their new allies truly were, and in the human fleet, Captain Alaric Voss allowed himself a faint smile. "Let's see what makes them so deadly," he murmured. The calm before the storm had ended. The human fleet hung in orbit above Vyrlia like a silent, ironclad storm. Each ship, black as obsidian and bristling with technology designed for survival in the deadliest worlds, reflected the twin suns in harsh glints. The Solari watched from their stations below, their multifaceted eyes wide with awe and uncertainty. Even with humans here, fear remained. The rogue warlord's fleet loomed closer each day, a shadow of destruction crawling across the sector. Captain Alaric Voss stood on the bridge of his flagship, Iron Maw, observing the planet below. His crew moved with precision, their movements fluid, confident, and deadly in the way only humans could be. Every sensor ping, every calculation, every command had already accounted for the deadly variables the Solari could barely comprehend. Humans did not panic. Humans adapted. Humans survived. Lieutenant Merck, standing beside him, pointed at the holographic projection of the approaching warlord fleet. "Sir, the numbers are staggering. Even with our fleet, they outnumber us 3-1, and their firepower," his voice trailed off. Alaric's expression remained calm, almost unreadable. "Numbers and firepower are meaningless if you control the battlefield. Every environment favors someone. Every weakness can be turned into a weapon. Let's find theirs." Meanwhile, on the Solari homeworld, Counselor Urindra and Commander Tharrell struggled to keep their people calm. Panic was spreading among the civilians. Whispers of doom grew louder with every passing hour. "We've never seen anything like them," Tharrell muttered. "Even with the humans here, I fear they may not survive this." Urindra's voice was firm, though her hands shook slightly as she gestured toward the orbiting fleet. "Humans survive because they refuse to surrender. They study danger, respect it, and then turn it against their enemies. Watch them. Learn from them. We may not survive if we remain the same, but perhaps we can adapt." High above the planet, the humans began their work. They did not greet the Solari with ceremony, nor did they waste time on formalities. The first priority was assessment. Drones scanned the planet's surface, mapping cities, energy grids, and key resources. Sensors probed the atmosphere, detecting storms, radiation pockets, and gravity anomalies. Humans called it environmental intelligence, understanding every element of a world so they could use it as a weapon or shield. Urindra watched as the humans moved across the planet in smaller dropships, their black armor gleaming even in the reflective Solari sunlight. Each human seemed aware of every risk, every hazard, yet they moved confidently. No storm could slow them, no radiation could harm them, no terrain could block them. Where Solari scientists had thought survival impossible, humans walked as if the planet were their home. Captain Voss landed on the outskirts of the capital, Lyrinth, and stepped onto the surface. The city was a marvel of alien engineering, floating towers, luminous bridges, and energy grids that hummed like the heartbeat of the planet itself. Yet Voss's eyes were not on the beauty, they were on vulnerability. "This city," he said to Lieutenant Merck, "is a jewel, but jewels break under pressure. We need fortifications, evacuation plans, and defensive traps. The warlord's fleet won't just attack, they'll tear this place apart if we let them." Merck frowned. "Fortifications, they've never built defenses like ours, and these people, they're not soldiers." "Then we make them soldiers," Voss replied, eyes scanning the horizon. "Not in the way they fight, but in the way they survive. Strategy beats numbers. Ingenuity beats brute force." Over the next several days, humans worked tirelessly with the Solari. They taught the aliens to exploit the environment, using mountains, oceans, and cities as natural barriers. They demonstrated how to divert storm energy into temporary shields, reroute energy grids to create traps, and hide essential resources in places impossible for the enemy to detect. Solari engineers marveled. "How do they do this?" whispered one technician to another as a human soldier redirected a minor storm to shield a strategic building. We would need decades to even understand these techniques, and they implement them in hours. Humans smiled at such remarks, but they did not boast. They acted. They knew the warlord would not wait, and hesitation could cost lives. Yet even as humans prepared, the threat grew. Scouts detected the rogue warlord's fleet, moving faster than expected, advancing toward Violia with deadly precision. Each scout report brought new challenges: ships that could survive intense radiation, fleets that adapted to attacks, and weapons capable of pulverizing entire cities. Humans analyzed these threats calmly. Every weakness, every predictable behavior, every overconfidence of the enemy became part of their strategy. One evening, as the twin suns set over the glowing cities, Alaric convened a strategy meeting aboard Iron Maw. The humans were seated around a holographic map of the planet and approaching fleet. "They're confident," he said, pointing at the enemy fleet. "Too confident. They think their numbers and weapons make them unstoppable. That's our advantage. Humans never play by their rules." Lieutenant Merck leaned forward. "But the Solari, they are not warriors. If the warlord attacks before they are ready," Alaric's gaze hardened, "then we make them ready. Survival is not just physical, it's mental. We train them to think, adapt, and endure. They'll become a part of the battle even if they don't fight in the traditional sense. And when the warlord underestimates them, that's when the advantage swings to us." Back on the planet, humans began training the Solari, but it was not typical military training. Humans taught them to anticipate threats, to work with environmental hazards, and to use intelligence over force. Solari civilians learned to evacuate cities efficiently, hide resources strategically, and manipulate energy flows to confuse enemy sensors. Children watched in fascination as humans demonstrated survival techniques. Even elders, skeptical at first, grew inspired. For the first time, Solari realized that their species could be more than fragile. Under human guidance, they began to understand resilience, ingenuity, and courage in ways they had never imagined. Yet the greatest challenge was not the Solari, it was the enemy. The rogue warlord's fleet was approaching faster than predicted, and the humans knew time was short. They deployed drones to test enemy sensors, using decoys and environmental interference to gather intelligence without alerting the warlord to their full strength. Alaric studied the data carefully. "They are fast, yes," he said, "but predictable. They rely on power and intimidation. We rely on adaptability. When they arrive, they will expect fear. They will expect panic. They will not expect humans." The Solari Council observed the humans with growing respect. Erendra finally admitted what many had feared to voice aloud. "We have called the deadliest species in the galaxy, and they are unlike anything we imagined. They are not reckless. They are precise. They are terrifyingly capable." As night fell on Violia, the Solari cities glowed with an ethereal light. The humans continued their preparations, ignoring exhaustion, hunger, and discomfort. Each step they took, each maneuver, each small improvement to the planet's defenses reinforced a single undeniable truth: the legends were real. Humans thrived in danger. Humans mastered impossible conditions. Humans would not fail. And yet, danger loomed. On the edge of the system, the rogue warlord's fleet moved like a shadow, unseen yet all-encompassing. Their approach would soon be unavoidable. Captain Voss stood on the balcony of Iron Maw, looking out at the planet below. "They think they can destroy this world without consequence," he murmured. "They think numbers make them unstoppable. We'll show them otherwise." Lieutenant Merck glanced at him, unease in his eyes. "Do you really believe we can win against such odds?" Alaric turned to him, eyes sharp and unwavering. "It's not about belief. It's about preparation, adaptability, and courage. Humans survive where others perish. That's what they forget about us. That's why the galaxy fears the deadliest species." As the stars shimmered in the distance, signaling the approaching warlord fleet, the humans continued their work. Fortifications were built, traps were laid, strategies were drawn. And the Solari watched, learning, adapting, and beginning to understand the extraordinary allies they had called upon. When the first scout ships of the enemy fleet appeared at the edge of Virelia's system, the humans were ready, not just with weapons, but with knowledge, tactics, and a plan that would turn even the deadliest threat into a battlefield they could control. The tension was unbearable, but the Solari began to see a glimmer of hope. Not the hope of miracles, but the hope of human ingenuity, courage, and lethal precision. And in that hope, they realized that survival was possible. Humanity had arrived. And when they struck, the galaxy would see why legends called them the deadliest species alive. The rogue warlord's fleet had entered Virelia's system, a dark cloud of iron and fire stretching across the void. Thousands of ships, each larger and more heavily armed than the last, moved in perfect formation, a living machine of destruction. From orbit, the Solari could barely breathe. Every simulation they had run predicted annihilation. Every instinct screamed retreat. But retreat was not an option, not when the humans were here. Captain Alaric Voss stood on the bridge of Iron Maw, eyes scanning the enemy formation with a mixture of calculation and anticipation. The humans had spent days studying the warlord's tactics, patterns, and predictable weaknesses. They had prepared Virelia like a chessboard, each city, mountain, and ocean current apiece waiting for the right moment. "Sir," Lieutenant Merck said, pointing at the holographic display, "their fleet, it's enormous. Even with our forces, we're outnumbered. This could end before it begins." Alaric shook his head. "Merck, look closer. They rely on strength and intimidation. They have power, yes, but they are slow to adapt. Every environment we control gives us an advantage. Remember, humans thrive where others fail. That's why they called us." Below, on the surface, the Solari braced themselves. Cities had been evacuated into underground bunkers and fortified zones. Energy grids had been rerouted to create defensive shields, while storm currents and magnetic anomalies were manipulated by human technology to serve as natural traps. Even the oceans were weaponized, with currents redirected to sweep away incoming assault craft. Urindra stood with the Solari Council, watching the dark mass of warlord ships approaching. Her heart pounded. "Can they really stop this?" she whispered. "They can," said Commander Tharrell, though his voice trembled. "I've never seen a species like this. The humans, they turned the impossible into advantage." And then the first shots rang out. The warlord's fleet opened fire, a storm of energy beams slicing through space toward Virelia. But the humans were ready. The Iron Maw and accompanying ships maneuvered through gravitational anomalies, ducking and weaving with impossible precision. Energy shields flared in synchronized bursts, absorbing attacks while small, agile human drones swooped around the enemy, jamming sensors and creating false targets. Lieutenant Merck watched, amazed. They're using the environment as a weapon," Alaric nodded. "Exactly. Every storm, every magnetic pulse, every asteroid belt, they become part of the battle. That's what makes us lethal." On the surface, humans moved swiftly. Drop teams navigated the hazardous terrain, planting devices that would disrupt enemy sensors and communications. They trained the Solari in real-time strategies, showing them how to anticipate enemy movements and react with calculated precision. Civilians, armed with human guidance and improvised tools, became part of a defensive network the warlord could never predict. The rogue warlord, a hulking figure on the command deck of his flagship, snarled at the unexpected resistance. How can a handful of ships and fragile aliens withstand my fleet?" he demanded. His generals were silent, afraid to answer. The humans were nothing like anything they had ever faced. They adapted, anticipated, and turned every disadvantage into strength. Alaric observed through his tactical viewport, a calm smile on his face. "They underestimate us," he said softly. That's the first mistake of many. The humans began executing a series of maneuvers that the warlord had never imagined. Small squadrons of ships lured enemy vessels into asteroid fields that had been subtly altered with gravitic manipulations. Magnetic storms, engineered by human technology, caused enemy weapons to misfire. Even the planet itself became a battlefield. Ocean currents washed away landing craft, storms concealed ambushes, and mountain passes funneled enemy troops into traps. On the ground, human strike teams moved like shadows, targeting key warlord installations with precision. They did not kill recklessly. They dismantled the enemy's advantages systematically. Every move was calculated to maximize efficiency and minimize loss. Solari engineers and civilians assisted, guided by human strategy. Together, they formed a network of resistance the warlord had not anticipated. Hours into the battle, the warlord realized his fleet was faltering. His confidence, built on numbers and overwhelming firepower, began to crumble. Human ingenuity, adaptability, and environmental mastery had turned his advantages into weaknesses. Every attempt to overwhelm the humans was countered by traps, maneuvers, and tactics that no other species could conceive. In orbit, Alaric prepared the final strike. The Iron Maw's weapon systems, designed for Deathworld conditions, could survive temperatures, radiation, and gravity that would destroy ordinary ships. Using the planet's own magnetic fields as a conduit, the humans amplified their energy weapons, directing a controlled, precise strike against the enemy flagship. Below, the Solari watched in disbelief as the massive warlord ship was crippled in a single, stunning blow. Explosions rippled across its hull and it drifted powerless, a monument to the humans' strategic brilliance. The rogue warlord's pride shattered. "Impossible," he bellowed. "No species can." "Humans can," Alaric replied coldly, cutting him off. "We survive, we adapt, we thrive." With their flagship disabled, the enemy fleet faltered. Humans pressed their advantage, striking with speed and precision. Even the massive warlord vessels could not withstand the combined ingenuity of human tactics, environmental manipulation, and calculated force. The once feared fleet was now in disarray, retreating to regroup, leaving Virelia's system intact. On the planet, the Solari erupted in relief and awe. They had witnessed what they could barely comprehend, a species that not only survived impossible conditions, but turned the impossible into victory. Humans had done more than defend Virelia. They had transformed the battle itself, making the environment, the terrain, and even the enemy's confidence part of their strategy. Urindra approached Alaric as he surveyed the aftermath from the planet's surface. "You saved us," she said, her voice trembling. "I have never seen anything like this. How do you do it?" Alaric looked at her, his expression calm, almost serene. "We don't just survive, we study, we adapt, we turn every weakness into advantage. That's what makes humans unstoppable. You called the deadliest species in the galaxy. Now you know why." Solari children who had watched humans demonstrate survival and ingenuity throughout the battle whispered excitedly among themselves. "We can do that too," one said. "If humans can survive anything, maybe we can too." And they were right. Humans had done more than protect a planet. They had taught a species to believe in its own resilience. Under human guidance, the Solari began to understand that survival was not about fear. It was about ingenuity, courage, and adaptability. Even the humans were not done. After the battle, they continued to fortify the planet, repair damages, and set up contingencies in case the warlord returned. Each action reinforced the lesson the Solari had learned. Humans thrived where others perished, and when humans were involved, impossible situations became opportunities. The rogue warlord, humiliated and retreating, realized too late the mistake of underestimating humanity. "They are monsters," he growled to his officers. No fleet, no weapon, no plan can stop them. They survive everything. Meanwhile, Alaric prepared for departure. The humans had accomplished their mission, but they left a lasting impression. Not just a military victory, but a legacy of ingenuity, courage, and resilience. Urindra stood on the balcony of the capital city as the humans departed, watching the black ships vanish into hyperspace. She felt a mix of awe, gratitude, and understanding. For the first time, the Solari realized that the legends were true. Humans were not merely survivors, they were masters of survival, strategy, and the impossible. Perhaps, she said softly, we have called the right species after all. And in the distance, as the stars shimmered around Violia, one truth echoed across the galaxy. When humans arrived, even the deadliest threats could be overcome. The planet was safe, the species preserved, and the legend of the Deathworlders had grown even greater. For humanity, the battle had been another test, another challenge, another opportunity to demonstrate that they thrived where all others would falter. And for the Solari, the lesson was clear. Survival was not just possible, it was inevitable when humans stood as allies. The galaxy had witnessed the power of human ingenuity, courage, and adaptability. And soon, every corner of space would learn to fear, respect, and admire the deadliest species alive. Violia's skies were calm again, but the planet itself still bore the scars of the approaching storm that had nearly destroyed it. Cities had been fortified, oceans redirected, and mountains subtly reshaped to serve as natural defense lines. Yet beneath the calm, tension lingered. The Solari had survived, but the rogue warlord's fleet could return. Humanity's work was not over. Captain Alaric Voss walked through the streets of Lyrinth with Lieutenant Merck and a small squad of humans. Civilians and engineers moved around them, repairing energy grids, fortifying structures, and learning the techniques humans had demonstrated during the battle. The Solari watched in awe, realizing that survival was no longer dependent on technology alone, but on adaptability, strategy, and courage, the very qualities that humans embodied. "This planet will stand," Alaric said quietly to Merck, surveying the repair work. "Not because of the weapons we brought, but because of the people we've taught. Humans don't just survive alone, we make others capable too." Merck shook his head. "I never thought I'd see the Solari so capable. They've changed in just a few days." "They've learned," Alaric replied, "and that's more important than any victory we've had." Back at the Solari High Command, Counselor Urindra convened a meeting with her council. For the first time, the Solari were not frightened. Their eyes held curiosity, determination, and even pride. "The humans have shown us the strength we never knew we had," Urindra said. "They arrived as allies, but they have left lessons. Lessons in resilience, strategy, and courage. We may have called the deadliest species in the galaxy, but they have taught us how to become stronger ourselves." Commander Tharrell nodded. "They have not just saved Violia, they have changed our species." Meanwhile, humans were finalizing the planetary defenses. Drop teams had placed advanced sensors, environmental traps, and emergency evacuation networks across the surface. Every city, valley, and coast was prepared to respond to any return of the rogue warlord. Yet these defenses were more than military, they were lessons, blueprints for the Solari to continue defending themselves. As the humans worked, the rogue warlord's fleet began retreating to distant systems. Reports from scouts confirmed the damage. Several of his largest ships were crippled, command networks disrupted, and morale shattered. He had underestimated the humans' adaptability, ingenuity, and ability to use the environment itself as a weapon. In his flagship, the warlord screamed in frustration. "Impossible! No species should survive this." He slammed his fist against the command panel, but even his fury could not erase the truth. Humans had rewritten the rules of combat. On Violia, Alaric convened a final strategy session with Solari leaders. "The battle is over for now," he said, But survival is continuous. Remember what you've learned. Think ahead, adapt, and trust in ingenuity. Numbers do not win wars. Intelligence, courage, and flexibility do. The Solari absorbed every word, recognizing a new philosophy of survival. Humanity had not only saved their world, they had imparted a mindset. They had proven that even the deadliest threats could be overcome with skill, strategy, and fearless adaptability. Days passed and the planet slowly healed. The humans prepared to depart, their mission complete. Civilians, engineers, and leaders gathered to bid them farewell. Children ran alongside drop ships, waving, eyes wide with admiration. Elders, once skeptical of humans' recklessness, now understood why they were feared and respected throughout the galaxy. Urindra approached Captain Voss as he boarded the Iron Maw for departure. "You came when we had no hope. You taught us, protected us, and left us stronger. How can we ever repay you?" Alaric looked at her, a calm smile on his face. "No repayment necessary. We do not act for thanks. We survive, we adapt, and we help others survive. That's what humans do. But remember this, you are stronger than you think. Continue what we've taught you. Your people can endure anything." As the human fleet slipped into hyperspace, a wave of awe and respect swept through the Solari. They had witnessed the impossible. A species that thrived in Deathworld conditions, turned environments into weapons, and outsmarted an overwhelmingly superior force. The legend of humans, the Deathworlders, had grown. Across Violia, stories were told not of brute strength or overwhelming numbers, but of ingenuity, courage, and resilience. The Solari had learned that survival was not about power alone. It was about intelligence, adaptability, and relentless determination. Weeks later, messages began arriving from neighboring sectors. The rogue warlord's retreat had spread the story. Humans had arrived unbidden, fought against impossible odds, and left without expectation of reward. Across the galaxy, species whispered of the deadliest species alive, not because of their weapons, but because of their unmatched ability to survive and thrive where all others failed. In the calm of space, Captain Alaric Voss watched the stars through the bridge viewport. "We've done what we came to do," he said quietly. "But the galaxy doesn't need reminders of what humans can do. They will see it themselves soon enough." Lieutenant Merck, standing beside him, nodded. "They call you legends, sir, but what we did, it was more than that." Alaric's gaze sharpened. "It's always more than that, Merck. Humans do not just fight, they endure, they adapt, they innovate. That is why the galaxy respects us. That is why the deadliest species always survives." Back on Violia, Counselor Urindra gazed at the recovering cities and the oceans that had been tamed to serve as both resources and defense. She thought of the humans who had arrived, uninvited yet unstoppable. She thought of the courage, strategy, and ingenuity they had shown. And she understood what the Solari had gained, not just safety, but knowledge, resilience, and hope for the future. Children laughed and played in streets now safe from destruction. Engineers tested new energy flows with human guidance. Leaders discussed strategies and plans they had never imagined before. Humanity had not only defended a planet, they had changed a civilization forever. And as the stars gleamed over Violia, a single truth echoed through the Solari's hearts: humans were not just survivors. Humans were legends of the galaxy, capable of turning impossible circumstances into victories. The rogue warlord's fleets, scattered and defeated, would carry this lesson across star systems. The galaxy would remember: never underestimate humans, never doubt their ingenuity, never assume they will fail. In the years that followed, Violia flourished. Technology improved, defenses strengthened, and culture thrived with a newfound confidence. The Solari told stories of the humans who had arrived like a storm and left a legacy. They spoke of courage, strategy, and the relentless will to survive. And somewhere in the void of space, Captain Alaric Voss and the Deathworlder fleet continued their journey. New systems awaited, new threats would rise, and humans would be ready as always to survive, adapt, and thrive. For humanity, survival was more than instinct, it was a philosophy. They were not just a species, they were a force of nature. And the galaxy had finally learned to fear, respect, and admire the deadliest species alive. As the stars stretched into infinity, one truth remained undeniable. Humans do not just exist, they conquer impossibility itself. And with that, the saga of Vyrlia ended. But the legend of humanity continued, spreading through the stars, a reminder that wherever danger arose, humans would be there. And survival, ingenuity, and courage would always triumph.